In this video, I'll demonstrate how to prepare a rubric in D2L. I'll show what D2L calls an analytic rubric that most of us are familiar with as a fairly standard practice in secondary and higher education. Here at Canisius, they are most commonly attached to discussion topics and Dropbox-based assignments, but they can also be attached to other things, such as items in the gradebook. I won't show every possible feature, but by the end you'll be familiar with the rubrics tool for creating rubrics that are handy for providing your students with feedback on their work. To create and manage rubrics, I need to go to Edit Course, and then to the Rubrics tool. In this space, I can see any rubrics I've already created or copied into this course with content from a previous semester. I could simply copy a rubric I created previously by clicking the drop-down menu caret next to the rubric's name and choosing Copy. This can be handy if you need to reuse a rubric with minor changes, since it will still preserve the old rubric used in previous semesters. I could rename this rubric by again clicking the drop-down menu caret and choosing Edit to enter the editor, where I can change the name and any other feature of the rubric. Note that rubrics that are already associated with any item in the course cannot be edited. In this case, I'll create a new rubric, so I click the blue New Rubric button. I'll give the rubric a descriptive name. D2L allows you to create and use several different types of rubrics determined by these drop-down menus. In this case, I'm going to choose Analytic Rubric. These are the familiar grid where your criterion for student achievement are in rows and their level of achievement is in columns. The grid is composed of text boxes, so you can enter text descriptions of achievement levels for each criterion either by typing or by pasting in text copied from a rubric you may have in, for example, a Google Doc or .docx file. Use the plus buttons on either side of the level header to add to the rubric criteria. Use the trash can icon in the level headers to remove a level you don't need. To the left of each criterion row, there's a handle that allows you to rearrange the criteria by dragging and dropping. Simply click and drag the handle. You can add criterion by clicking the link Add Criterion at the bottom of the rubric. Similarly, you can delete any criterion that you do not need by clicking the trash can to the right of that criterion row. Click the left-hand box for each criterion to name it. If you'd like, you can rename the levels too by clicking the level names at the top. So now I'm going to rename the criteria and levels and add the individual descriptions in the grid boxes. I have my rubric text installed in each box and have labeled both the criteria and levels. If I use this rubric to assess student work and I make it visible to students, they will see which boxes I chose or clicked as I assessed. If I wanted to, I could also add initial feedback, which is an additional message that will appear to students separately for each box I click. Now let's consider how this rubric will be mathematically scored. You have three choices accessible through the scoring drop-down menu at the top of the rubric. A points-based rubric means that the rubric is a simple addition problem where each criterion is worth the same number of points. That's how it's set up now. A custom points rubric allows me to establish different points values or weights for each criterion. This is what I'll demonstrate, since I suspect most faculty at the college will opt for this. And so I'll click Custom Points. Once I do, the denominators for each criterion are opened up as text boxes. I can adjust the denominator value for any criterion. After that, I can even set the points value for each level within a criterion if I want something other than the simple intervals that D2L provides. Lastly, I can establish points values for the overall levels based on the overall score received. So the rubric mechanics are complete. Here at the upper right of the rubric, I'll set or verify that my rubric is published. That way it can be used to assess student work. Now I'll scroll to the bottom and click Options to see a few additional options that determine how the rubric will appear to me or my students. You can decide whether or not a student can see the rubric and when. This is helpful if a rubric must necessarily contain information that would allow the student to inappropriately complete the assignment just using the rubric. Choose any of these three options. Rubric is always visible to learners. Rubric is hidden until feedback is published. Or rubric is hidden from students altogether. The first option means students can see the rubric provided it's installed somewhere, such as a Dropbox or a discussion that is published and visible to them. This is before or after you've graded their work. The third option means that students will only see the rubric after you've graded or provided feedback on their work using the rubric. And the third option, as you might expect, means that the students will never see the rubric. Lastly, you can add a description of your rubric that students do not see, but you see in the rubrics toolset. This can be handy for keeping track of your rubrics, or if you share course content with colleagues. D2L has auto-saved all of the things I've done here, so when I click Close, my rubric is ready to use.